From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Ciao.
If you got a tip for Melissa, a scary tale you remember hearing a long time ago, a true crime mystery in your hometown, who actually put the ram in the Ramalama Ding Dong, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. Everybody needs somebody sometime, and she's always looking for bodies to identify Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Well, producer Mark, sometimes I think you've hit like a new low with showing your age, and then you say, who put the ram in the Ramalama Ding Dong? And I'm thinking, wow, could you not get the rights to 23 Skidoo?
Happy trails.
Oh my
to
God!
you.
All right, seriously, I'm worried about you, Grandpa.
Again, sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and just think of it as you are the keeper of pop culture from the turn of the last century, as opposed to I married a man who's 800 years old.
Listen, you're here to identify with the the younger generation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm here to attract the the demographic that maybe is a little older. Maybe
In a month, I will qualify for the next level up when you check your age. So. I'm nobody's youngster, and apparently we are both as old as Methuselah.
Well, yes, that's right. You're about to reach the age where the demographers don't care about you anymore.
That's right. Nobody cares about my demographic.
That's right. You've got about another month.
Oh,
You've
thanks
got
for that.
About 3 weeks left for demographers to care about you.
Thanks for that,
what
my
you
friend.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm really old. So, speaking of old, it took me a long time to get on to the Patreon tip, and no pun intended, tipsters. But I have issues asking people for money. I don't know what my problem is, because I have no problem if people need money. I have no problem donating, to GoFundMe's or anything like that, Kickstarters. No problem with that. But asking people for money, I think because I love what we do and because Mark is such a fantastic producer, he makes everything sort of seamless. A lot of independent podcasts, we don't have a network behind us. A lot of independent podcasts, really go out of pocket for expenses. So I just borrow Mark's wallet, and that's probably not, he's so generous and kind, but I'm not going to have a problem putting up our Patreon page, because we're going to have things you get for your support.
Yeah,
so
we're offering some good stuff here.
Yeah, we've got 4 tiers. There's one tier we have left, which we will work out later, probably for additional content. But for right now, we have tier 1, which is basic bishes, $2 a month. Tier 2, dedicated detectives, $5 or more per month. Tier 3 is the true tipsters. That's $10 or more a month. And then Tier 4 is the tipster unicorns, $20 or more per month. And we can, tell you what you get for each tier. You can decide if you want to support us, financially. We can't thank you enough for the support you give us emotionally and spiritually, because the people that actually know about this podcast and have found us through some sort of strange grassroots organic way of finding podcasts, because I'm a really bad networker. We thank you, because we can't do this without you. There's no us without you. So
we really do. We really do appreciate it.
If you, it's episode 80. We're waiting, 60 episodes from season 1, and this is the 20th episode from season 2 of 2019. We waited a long time to jump on the Patreon train because I just wasn't comfortable, but I'm trying to relax my crack. So just know that if you would like, you didn't need to know that either. If you would like to...
I kind of needed to know that.
No, we've discussed this.
Damn.
Why the tattoo above my butt?
Right.
Because you're better with written instructions.
Right.
Exit only, my friend.
Why don't we get back to the Patreon
Okay,
thing?
so if you would like to become a patron of Just the Tipsters, we'll be putting some things out on social media explaining it. We quote unquote launched the page, but I don't really know what any of that means because I'm old.
Well, let me attempt this here.
Okay, good.
Patreon, patreon.com/just the tipsters. And you will find our page, and you will find the different levels which you can subscribe to become a patron. Pick a level, and then send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. Let us know that you've subscribed, and then we will tell you what your choices are for your swag.
Oh, okay, that's good.
And then we will, but next time I'm going to convince Melissa to actually advertise what we will give you.
Okay.
One step at a time, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry, the whole thing about money makes me uncomfortable. So speaking of being uncomfortable, if you have a moment and would like to go to iTunes and rate and review or even subscribe to this podcast, we would be very grateful. Any sort of rating or review is really appreciated. That's how other listeners find podcasts, by the number of reviews, the positive reviews, hopefully mostly, or all. And if you like the podcast, remember it's called Just the Tipsters. And if you don't like the podcast, remember it's called The Death of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And if you would like,
it really is not.
It's not called that. I made that up. If we would be very grateful for any.
And don't forget our Facebook page.
Right, we have a Facebook page, Just the -Tipsters, the podcast.
Yes.
If you have any stories you want us to cover from your locale where you live, or even across the world, if it's a case that has been fascinating to you, which is what is happening this week. I didn't know about this case until it was given to me by a wonderful man. I'll explain later. Please call us at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or you can absolutely email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. That's all together, jttipsters@gmail.com. So we would love to hear from you however you want to contact us. Smoke signal, probably not Molotov cocktail, carrier pigeon, any way you want to get a hold of us. I was just showing our age again. We'd be delighted to hear from you. So the tier 1 of Just the Tipsters, the basic bishes. So let's talk about basic bishes for just a moment. I got my 23andMe results back, and whoo boy, am I boring. So boring. I really wanted to be something exciting. I was kind of holding out for like 100% Mongolian. Not a trace. I was actually afraid that my results would be hampered, in some way, because I couldn't get all the spit needed to get a decent, genome separation from your DNA. But I guess I submitted enough spit, which makes me feel that my theory was correct all along, that they want more spit than they can use because they're weird. I think they're just weird.
There's just somebody there with a very strange fetish.
Yeah, like a spit fetish. So I am 96% Northwestern European. Hooray. 64% British and Irish, mostly United Kingdom, some Irish. I didn't really feel a lot of Irish. Both Mark and I are Welsh, have Welsh in us. So, and no Guernsey is detected, which makes me feel a little better because no one can call me a cow. So that's a good thing. I mean, you can call me that, but it's not true.
Come on.
Well, that's all. The only thing I know what Guernsey is a cow. So anyway, I'm 13.3% French and German. I feel so sad for my beloved tipster Camilla, who is Swedish, and I'm only 1.1% Scandinavian, Camilla, because I was hoping that we were somehow related. But yeah, it's a lot of British shit going on up in here, all up in my grill here, which is a little disappointing. I mean, not disappointing. I'm fine. The English people are lovely. I have good teeth, though. I have very good teeth.
You do not have English teeth.
I don't, thank you.
You have Welsh teeth, which is
that's good. Okay, I don't know what that means either, but
I'm not sure either.
I don't either. But I mean, there's just like nothing, no Mongolian, no Korean, no sub-Saharan African, just zero, just shitloads of zeros, So no Sudanese, Somali, just boring. But my BFF, Angela, Tipster Angela, is fascinated by the 0.07% trace ancestry. So I got some trace in me. I know
well, you know, the Trace people have a long history.
A long history? I can't wait to
in Traceland.
hear what my Trace ancestors have got going.
It's the long-buried civilization of Traceland.
I hope they have good teeth there.
Which is right next to Atlantis.
Atlantis? It's buried.
Yeah.
Traceland is buried under the ocean like Atlantis?
It's actually buried under Atlantis.
You know, this explains a lot right now. Explains a lot. I do have 0.03% Native American. So I'm embracing the native side of me.
Yeah, can you take the sweat lodge out of the backyard, please? It's really starting to smell things up.
You know, I would never have a sweat lodge because I hate hot. So don't even pull that bullshit half Sicilian, half Welsh fuckface. I don't have a sweat lodge and I never will. I hate sweating. And I do it, you know, when it's cold. So there's no way I'm having if I had a sweat lodge in our backyard, I would be dead. I would be dehydrated. I would be a piece of dehydrated mango. So no, that's not happening. But that was really cute that you tried to.
I am not a fuckface.
You are such a fuckface.
I'm an ass face.
Oh, okay.
And as everybody knows, asphacia is buried underneath the
Traceland.
Traceland.
That's where you belong. And do you think underneath Atlantis and Traceland is fuckfacia? No,
Asphacia.
Asphacia.
We're losing track now.
I've lost so much from the beginning of this podcast. I have lost it all. I feel as if the marrow has been sucked out of my bones. So when I mentioned the this week's case, it's, you know, you'd like to think you know a lot about true crime, and it's, you know, obviously one of my passions. But sometimes you meet people in the most fascinating places, but sometimes you meet someone who gives you something and you're like, oh, I love you and I hate you at the same time because this is Rabbit Hole City. So we were very blessed to have been invited to a 50th anniversary party for two of our favorite people, Rick and Betty. And they own a restaurant in Studio City that we love with all of our hearts, The Good Neighbor. And they are the definition of a team. I've really never seen two people who were meant to be together like this, who work like a well-oiled machine. You know, they live together, they work together. It's a family affair.
Oh yeah, their kids work there.
Their grandkids.
Their grandkids work there.
Yeah,
right.
And they now have great grandkids. But so they obviously have been married 50 years. They got together when they were about 4. And I'm not sure how you legalize marriage at the age of 4, but I know they were young, but they look ageless.
Yeah,
They're both
they really
gorgeous and ageless, and they have these beautiful children. They have a son and daughter, and they have wonderful granddaughters, and they have a grandson, and they have a great granddaughter, and it's just amazing, this beautiful family. So their daughter invited us. It was a surprise 50th anniversary party. So we're all waiting at their house on a Saturday a couple of weeks ago. And people came from New York, where they're from. And that these are obviously lifelong friends, decades long friends and family.
It really tells you something that so many people flew in from the East Coast.
Exactly.
For this event.
They're just like salt of the earth people. They're amazing human beings, and I adore them. And I also adopted Betty's brother, Tony, and Betty's friend, Bobby. So Tony and Bobby come from New York for this anniversary party, and they're two of the coolest dudes ever. And Mark and I just fell in love with them and just kind of followed them around for the rest of the day like puppies. So,
well, you did.
Well, all right, I did.
I like Tony a lot. I just didn't follow him around.
You don't like Bobby?
I liked them both.
Okay,
there were a couple of like real old friends that.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is an East Coast thing or not, but Tony came out to visit, and Tony's married, he's got a family, but who did he bring with him? He brought his best friend. Yeah. Who they like hang out together and do stuff together.
But Bobby knows Rick and Betty also.
Right. They grew up together, and so they know, and it was just awesome.
It was a beautiful thing. So Then I find out that Tony is a true crime fan, and he has a case that's been on his mind, and it's interesting in that it's such a great, fascinating case, but it's also local to him. So that's what I think made it a little more close to home. And it is a fascinating case. It's not unlike 100 or maybe even 1,000 other cases, except that this one has. I mean, when I say Rabbit Hole City, I mean it's got in it, and I mean I'm stumbling all over myself because I'm not even sure where to start. It happened quickly, and they called it a cold case for 6 months. That's hardly cold, but okay. And then it became resolved quickly. Some people may say too quickly. And it's still, even though there have been some decisions, some additional filings made, it's come to a conclusion, but I don't think this is over. I don't think this is over by a long shot. And it's a real fascinating case. I think when he gave it to me, a couple of weeks ago, I got into it and I thought, oh, this is, all right, this is kind of cut and dried. And then I got a little more into it and I was like, oh no. And then I got more into it and I just kept reading and I would hear, the thing about this is that it was hard to assemble because there is a lot of information, but also not a lot of deep information. So you have to go. I'm not saying I access the dark web. I'm saying one article would mention something that happened, and then you could not find information about it, and you had to dig and dig and dig. And that's part of the fun for me. I enjoy the dig. But there is a lot of information online. ABCnews.com carried a lot of information about it. They covered it pretty heavily, and it's out of New York. It's out of Queens. It's a neighborhood in Queens, Howard Beach. Fox News covered it. Quite frankly, the best information I got was from a local paper, a Queens paper called the Daily Eagle. And it's fascinating to me, like the LA Weekly, God rest its soul, had some of the most amazing journalists and some of the best information. And you would like to think the LA Times, and I'm a fan of the LA Times. It has gone through its ups and downs for me. But when it comes to covering true crime, the LA Times can do a very wonderful job depending on the.
Yeah, but they don't do it as well as a true local paper would.
Yeah.
Like the Queens paper, or actually in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Daily News,
right,
which does great local crime stories.
Yeah. I mean, it's so the Queens Daily Eagle, a really good source. Fox News, like I said, abcnews.com. A lot of these news sites or even news networks have a large online presence because I'm an old person who likes the newspaper. I like something tangible, but seeing it online, can condense it. So this is the case of Karina Vetrano. And when Tipster Tony brought it to me, I thought, I've never even heard of it. But everyone who was at the anniversary party from New York was like, oh, are you talking about the jogger? Is this the jogger case? Is this the jogger? It was like the news spread like wildfire through the participants of this anniversary party that they were discussing the Karina Vetrano case. And some of these people were New Yorkers who were transplanted Californians. So it's not like you had to be in New York for it to be a big story, but somehow this one slipped my radar. And when I got into it, I was like, holy shit. And I think it's because of the fascinating details. That's the part that is fascinating to me, is the number of details that make this even more layered than, like I said, it's a case like hundreds of others across the United States where a beautiful young woman goes missing or is found murdered. It's like many, many other cases, but then it's not. And I'll explain. So Karina Vetrano, beautiful Italian-American woman, 30 years old, goes jogging in her Howard Beach neighborhood on August 2nd of 2016. So it's a current case. She is a lovely girl, and like all of the horrible stories you hear where someone was 1 month from retirement and they cover a shift for a friend, and that's the shift where someone comes in and kills everyone. Karina was going jogging for the first time by herself. She usually went with her father, who was her jogging partner, who was a fire person, and he actually had been a first responder to the Twin Towers on September 11th in 2001. So he was at home recovering from a back injury, and this would have been the first time that she went jogging by herself, and she never comes home.
I do hate hearing that.
It's awful. It's awful. So she's beautiful. She's fit. She's wearing appropriate jogging clothes. It's not a lot. And she's wearing that in August in New York, where it's hot. There's a very small video clip of her that was shown on Crime Watch Daily of her jogging toward this park, the Spring Creek Park in Howard Beach. So this beautiful girl, late afternoon, early evening, goes jogging and doesn't come home. Within a few hours, her father, the New York City Fire Department retiree, is worried there's a problem. So Karina, even though, she lives like very close to her parents in the same neighborhood, she is a fascinating girl. She graduated St. John's University with a master's degree in speech pathology. She worked with children with autism, which this is going to play in later because the perpetrator is someone who probably could have really benefited from her graciousness, from her, the way that she, went to school and focused on helping people with learning disabilities. It's heartbreaking. She was also a writer, and a friend had done a documentary about her, a little short film that was inspired by her poems in 2013. But she lived, near her parents. She worked in Manhattan with kids with autism. She, took private students and tutored them in speech pathology. She was just a real stellar girl. So she goes jogging. Her father's like, "Where is my girl? Where is my girl? She should be back by now." So within just a few hours, and knowing that, she has not returned, her father is like, "Look, I need help. She's not returning any calls or texts. I need help. I need to go look for her." And he has this back injury. So one of their neighbors is an NYPD police chief. So about 11 p.m., her father, the police chief, and a small search party go looking for her, and quickly they find her 15 feet off a trail in the Spring Creek Park, not far from her home. She's face down. She's partially naked. She's covered in scratches and bruises. One of her teeth is missing. There's evidence she's been sexually assaulted. And an autopsy that's confirmed the next day said that she died of strangulation. So obviously this is now a homicide. She didn't trip and fall and hurt herself and have her clothes pulled off by weeds. She has been murdered. So they were saying that she had bit her perpetrator so hard that she cracked her front tooth.
Oh my.
She fought. I don't know how hard you have to bite. This is a girl who fought really hard, right? I don't know how hard you have to bite someone to crack your tooth. I thought until I searched that the tooth had been broken off like by a punch, or she had been hit in the back of the head by a rock, which she had been. I thought maybe someone had knocked it out with a rock. No, it was from biting her perpetrator. Her hands were found clutching grass when she's being dragged off the trail about 15 feet, and she has handfuls of weeds and grass she's clutching so tightly when she finally expires because she's fighting so hard for her life. So there was a handprint on her neck. She'd been strangled so tightly. The DNA of her attacker was found under her fingernails, on her back, on her phone, which was several feet away and thrown into the weeds, and on her neck, her back, her phone. And
so they could get a handprint from somebody strangling her so hard,
so tight, and so long.
Oh my God!
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they have this DNA and they recover it at the scene, right? And there's nothing. They run it through local and national databases, and nothing. The NYPD checks 1,700 reports that have come in and 250 leads. And in the meantime, the first 2 weeks, they're looking for what is being described as two jacked up white men. I don't know what the descriptions were because it was sort of loose. Within 2 weeks, the DNA comes back to having belonged to someone of African American descent. So the DNA is now of a black man, not two jacked up white men. 6 months go by. 6 months go by until, now I'm going to say his name as Channel Lewis, but I've heard it pronounced three different ways by three different sources. Chanel, Chanel, and Channel.
Spelling, please.
Chanel, Lewis. So Channel Lewis, I just don't have the heart to call him Chanel because he's a grown man. And it would be like, calling, I don't know, somebody Coach or Louis Vuitton or,
right,
Chanel. So Channel Lewis is arrested 6 months later. Now, this brings us to another part of the story. When you see Mr. Lewis and hear Mr. Lewis, you think to yourself, it's so off-putting because there'll be short bursts where he appears to be very cogent and answers questions fully. But probably 75% of the interaction with him is very odd and stilted. He, at some points, looks confused, that he doesn't exactly know where he is or what's happening. He will answer a question one way and then reverse his answer. Almost like he's hoping the answers he gives anyone interrogating him will please them. And I kept thinking, I watched the video that was finally released after his arrest. 28 minutes of it has been released, and
This is the interrogation.
Yeah, yeah. He was in the interrogation jail as opposed to prison for 12 hours. 6 hours of it he hadn't. They hadn't questioned him, and it's not, or it's not videotaped. He was kept in a holding cell and didn't sleep. So it can be said that he was tired, but that wasn't what was troubling me. What was troubling me is he appeared to be of a diminished capacity. I was like, okay, he could be tired, but no, there's something wrong. And I dug and I dug and I dug, and he graduated from a school for developmentally disabled children. Not a lot is brought up about that. I don't know
That's
why.
Interesting. How did they get him, by the way? Through DNA?
Well, how they got him, another real bizarre red herring in this rabbit hole. Not to mix metaphors and fish and animals.
I'm starting to get hungry.
I know, I'm sorry. So a police officer was, after 6 months of the case being quote unquote cold, a police officer was reminded of a stop he made 6 months before Karina was murdered. So a year earlier, he had been called by, I don't want to say like Gladys Kravitz, a nosy neighbor, but someone who said there's a man in a hoodie with a crowbar walking in people's backyards and going up into, looking at a strip mall and businesses. And he reports it. So the police follow him. When they catch up to him at the strip mall, it's Channel Lewis, and he no longer has the crowbar. He has the hoodie on, and you don't want to convict someone for being a wearer of a hoodie. I have 20 hoodies. So, but he doesn't have the crowbar with him anymore. There's nothing to tie him to anything, and it's just a report. But this police...
so they took his name.
Took his name. It's, he's developmentally disabled, like I said, but sometimes he seems very clear. It's none of these things are a straight line. It's definitely not linear. It's a very up and down kind of case. So they bring him in. He's, at this point, 20. He's unemployed, lives with his mother and sisters in the basement of a 3-story apartment about 3 miles from Spring Creek Park, which is off the Beltway, I guess. And he gives them his DNA, and it comes back as a match to
I see.
the DNA found on Karina Vetrano's neck, back, phone, and a mixture of her DNA and his DNA under her fingernails.
Okay. That leads us to the interrogation.
Then he is interrogated by, there's a DA in the room. It's pretty interesting what this interrogation, it's pretty strange to me. So the reason I chose this part of the 28-minute video, which you will hear 3 minutes of right now, and you can hear the rest of it, you can see it on YouTube, is that I feel like this is a good chance to hear his responses, his changing of his story. Here's a moment where a visual can be helpful. In the video, you see him, in my mind, my opinion only, looking at his interrogator trying to get the answer right, which people of diminished mental capacity, that's what happens quite often. When you're interrogated by someone you feel like is in authority, you want to give them the answers they want. You don't realize what you're doing is shooting yourself in the foot, to put it in a not great way. So here's just a few minutes of the interrogation of Channel Lewis. Can you hit that audio, producer Mark?
So when did she fall to the ground? After you grabbed her? All right. Now, when she fell to the ground, was she lying in the path or was she off the path? The pathway. When she fell to the ground and you were hitting her, was she on the pathway or was she off the pathway?
She's kind of on the pathway.
All right. About how wide is this path, would you say? Like
a couple of feet.
Okay. So it's not that wide, right?
Mm.
All right. And when you were hitting her in the face, was she face up or face down?
She was like face up.
Face up. Did she say anything at all?
Mm.
No. Did she scream?
No, because her tooth broke.
I'm sorry? Her tooth broke? Right. Were you covering her mouth at all?
Mm.
No? Okay. The tooth that broke, was it like in the front, the top, or the bottom? Do you remember?
No.
Okay. How long would you say you were hitting her for? About how long in time, I mean?
The whole thing was like about 5 minutes.
5 minutes? All right. And did you do anything else to her besides hit her? Did you put her hands on any other part of her body?
No.
Okay. Around her neck or anything?
Yeah, there was kind of strangulation.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
You put her hands on around her neck? Okay. Do you remember, was it one hand or both hands?
Both.
Both? All right. And how long did you have your hands around her neck?
I don't know.
Okay. Did you squeeze her neck when you had your hands around her neck?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. You don't remember for how long, though? Okay.
Because I was mad at the incident.
You were mad about an incident. Okay, we're going to get to that in a little bit, all right? I just want to find out what happened, all right? And was she still moving when you had your hands around her neck?
Oh, yeah, and then she dropped into the water.
Okay. Well, when you had your hands around the neck, was she on the ground or standing up?
She's still on the ground.
On the ground. Face up or face down?
Face up.
All right. And then how did her face go in the water?
Strangling. We were near the water, and then put her face in the ground.
Okay. You were
So
strangling
she
her,
fell
you
in the
said?
water.
And you put her...
No, she fell in the water,
Okay.
and then my hand was bleeding, so I went to wash off all the blood.
Okay. Which hand, do you remember? You just showed me your right hand, right? Your right hand? Where was it bleeding? What part of the hand? Your knuckle?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when her face went in the water, was she face up or face down?
Down.
Down?
Or face up.
A face up?
Yes.
All right.
So, I hope that's enough to intrigue you to watch the entire 28 minutes.
Yeah, it really sounds like he's confused. Like,
Oh boy. So
yeah, he doesn't know. I think he's. If you watch the video, he really, like you say, he looks like he's staring at the interrogator. Like, what does he want me to say?
registering his answers and how the interrogator's body language is yes or no. So I watched this video 4 times, and at first the first thing I thought was, don't be judgmental, Melissa. But it felt very much like it wasn't an interrogation at all. It was I'm going to tell you what happened and you're going to say yes or no. So it didn't feel like the interrogator was asking questions. It felt like he was implanting information for Channel Lewis to say, yeah, that's what happened. And Channel Lewis couldn't even get the answers right the first time. The more I watched it, the more I became more somewhere in the middle. Okay, that question he answered correctly, and he seemed to know and understand what was happening. Watched it a 3rd time, became more confused. Watched it a 4th time. I was like, I can't watch it anymore because my brain's gonna explode. So a little background: he graduated from a school for developmentally disabled children. He's unemployed, lived with his mom and sisters. He has no criminal record, but has been picked up a few times for loitering, public urination, nothing that would scream rape and kill. He, as a youngster in school, had been reported by a teacher's aide when he said, I want to stab all the girls. Now, Karina, you're a teenager. Maybe somebody's rejected you. Karina Vetrano wasn't stabbed. He apparently told his teacher's aide that he hates all women. I don't know. So, but he's, been described by neighbors as a loner and mentally unstable. You know what? I bet you if you ask a few people that live in, Santa Clarita, they'd probably call me that too. I don't know. Probably.
Oh, now, come on.
I'm a loner and mentally unstable. Let's just be honest.
Stop.
Okay. So there's just nothing in his background other than, being reported for being black and for, he violated curfew rules for Spring Creek Park and peed in public. We don't know for sure if he was the person that was carrying a crowbar in the backyards of the homes in May of 2016, or if there was even a crowbar involved. He's just been stopped and frisked. There's nothing in his background that says this is what he's going to do. Now, you barely can hear him mention, I was upset by the previous incident. And the interrogator says, yeah, we're going to get to that. So the previous incident is his family had recently moved to a new apartment. One of the neighbors plays rap music loudly during the day and maybe sometimes at night. I don't know for sure. Mr. Lewis said it was all the time. And he had asked the neighbor to stop many times, and the neighbor would still do it. So he expressed to his interrogators before the recording that he was upset about this, that his neighbor played music loud. So he went for a walk in Spring Creek Park. Apparently, his family said he left his home after arguing with them, probably over whether they should report the loud music. And he seems to have a very clear, Mr. Lewis has a clear line of right and wrong. I don't know if it's anyone else's line of right and wrong, if it's truly in a legal sense, or if it's you don't play your music loud and bother.
It's probably the latter.
Yeah.
It's probably just
that's what it seems like.
a moral sense of right and
yes.
wrong.
And it may just be his moral compass, not anyone else's. So he goes for a walk in Spring Creek Park. It's believed that he comes across Karina Vetrano. They don't know each other. It may not have been premeditated. He may have, it just could have been a crime of opportunity. And he grabs her, fights with her, potentially sexually assaults her. Although there's no real clear evidence of that. Evidence meaning DNA. This case is so muddy in so many ways. But when he says, oh, don't cry, her tooth broke. I don't know if he knew that because her tooth broke off on his hand when he was strangling her or fighting with her, or if that piece of information had been given to him previously, because there's 6 hours unaccounted for.
Well, yeah, that is very suspect in my view.
In my mind too. So when I watched it the second time and I heard him say her tooth broke, and the interrogator says her tooth broke, and you see him perk up, and Channel Lewis seems to think, oh, okay, I said the right thing.
I said the right thing.
Yep. It looks to me like he just is trying so hard to please them, not knowing what he's doing is killing himself in so many words. So he says her tooth broke, my hand was bleeding, and I wiped it off in the water, washed it off in the water. So there's a puddle really. It's not like a pond or a lake or a stream. It's a puddle and like a marshy area. And he is asked numerous times, was she face up or face down? Well, she was found face down. So first he says face down, and then he says, no, face up, face up.
And he says, sorry.
Yeah. So I think he's saying sorry that I gave you the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He says, face up. Sorry,
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
You know, you can hear that right at the end of that
yep,
clip.
You sure can. So this is so awful. The following day, Mr. Lewis is taken to the ER by his father, who is a retired school principal. Apparently his parents are divorced because he lives with his mother and his sisters. But his father took him to the ER for the hand injury. He was treated for the hand injury.
Oh,
his knuckle wouldn't stop bleeding. It's so. So he comes home that night, and his mother says, he did look disheveled and his clothes were torn. Now, Channel Lewis says to his family, I was mugged by a group of men, but there's no evidence of that, and there's no police report filed. And while at the hospital the following day, there are scratches and cuts on his upper body, and the hand injury is noted in the hospital records. So his father said, I have never heard about this young woman. I didn't know anything had happened to her, until 6 months later when his son is arrested. And his mother is a champion for him. Obviously, you would want your mother to be. But, he... Okay. So there is
I can hear your frustration.
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
This case is it's killing me here.
Yeah,
I'm so angry at you, Tipster Tony. So there is before, and here's why it's so complicated and layered. For 2 weeks, they're looking for two jacked up white guys. It's then found out the DNA is related to an African-American male. They then change the profile, and they have a sketch of a person who was seen leaving Spring Creek Park. And I'll be goddamn if it's not real close to what Channel Lewis looks like. I mean, it's real close. The drawing is somewhat heavier. His face is rounder and heavier. But remember, he's seen on video 6 months later, and he is much thinner. And I don't know if he's thinner just naturally losing weight, if he is beset with guilt and has stopped eating, because he is now 23 years old, and the pictures of him from court look much like that original sketch. A much heavier, rounder face. Also, he looks older. I mean, that age for a young man, you change. Even from your late teens to your early 20s, he's now 23. He looks different. But he also reports similar things while being held in prison. So he's upset at his neighbor for playing loud music at inappropriate times or inappropriate to him. He complains about rude guards in prison. They're rude and they use curse words.
Hello?
So he's got that line, like producer Mark said, of right and wrong. It's an odd, which could be, from his mental disabilities. I don't know. But it's so odd to me, of all the things that you would want to complain about while you're being held in prison, that the guards are rude and they use curse words.
Yeah.
Why would that bother you when you're fighting for your life,
Right.
unless you don't understand that you're fighting for your life?
Yeah, and that you're in prison and guards tend to talk.
Yeah, they're gonna. So this case has, when I say red herrings, I mean red to the herrings. So August 7th, 5 days after Karina's murder, a woman in Princeton, Mass., Vanessa Marcotte, was found murdered after going out on a jog, and she was strangled. And it was like, oh, they're linked. And then they find out, no, the DNA doesn't match. They're not linked. So it's like they were trying to, add things on to make their case stronger. And it wasn't really holding water in any way, shape, or form, other than this DNA. Now, big proponent of the DNA research. I pray to God 20 years from now, we don't find out, oh, you know what, you can change DNA. And I don't know that anyone knows how to do that and could do it, especially people in the Howard Beach Police Department. I mean, I don't know that they have.
Well, I'm sure somebody's working on a way to change DNA to make it inadmissible anymore.
Right.
But as of right now, it's pretty definitive.
I know. I'm throwing it out there, and I don't want to muddy the waters even more, but it is, it's fascinating, because this is, how do I say this? Slight DNA. This isn't his bodily fluids left on her. This is, quite frankly, touch DNA. Now, the mixture of his and her DNA under her nails is a little more definitive to me, but, his mother and her attorney are saying, the DNA on her neck could be touch DNA. And I didn't understand at first, but what they were saying was that Mr. Lewis could have touched something, Ms. Vetrano could have touched that after him and then wiped her own neck. I don't even know if that's a possibility. I know. I don't know that that's a possibility. To me, that part is damning, although there's so many questions about it. I still find it extremely damning, that his DNA is found. Not that I want it to be found on her body in another form, but that it's found on her neck, on her back, on her phone, and under her nails.
And it's all his DNA.
And it's his DNA, except for what's under her nails is his and hers, which makes perfect sense. If she is clawing him, he's scratched up, his body scratched up, and his hand, his knuckle is bleeding profusely, and he said her tooth fell out. The whole thing is overwhelming and heartbreaking. It's like, well, this is slammed shut. This is, a total wrapped up case now.
Even with that weird confession, it still seems pretty.
So many questions for me. So many questions for me. So one of the things that I spoke with Tipster Tony about was, tell me what you want brought out in this case. And he said that everyone's under investigation. And he's right. So before we get to what I think is a giant amount of bizarre and yet not really deep, pretty surface malfeasance, I want to say that the Vetranos have, been fighting a very hard fight. Their daughter was murdered, yards from their house on her first run alone. And also I want to tell you, Karina Vetrano was 4'11". She is tiny. Now, when asked how big she is, Channel Lewis says tall at first, and then he says 5'4", 5'5".
Yeah.
At this point, I don't know if any of his answers are viable. I just don't trust any of his answers. Trying to look back on 6 hours of him being held, he wasn't sleeping, he didn't sleep. He's then, brought in and they're recording it. And this is the part they release. They release these 28 minutes. And I think these 28 minutes, they think maybe they tried to do what I saw, show that, okay, he said her tooth broke. I was strangling her. Well, he didn't really say anything. He repeated what they said to him. So the 28 minutes the police release are damning and to them and him. They're damning to the police and damning to Mr. Lewis. He says things that are remarkably close to what happened and are awful. I have no faith in whether those answers came from him or whether they had been fed to him in the previous 6 hours in the holding cell. And he is in a place where he's tired. He is developmentally disabled, and he is answering the way he thinks they want him to answer. So even Mr. Vetrano submits his DNA because when the case is cold, they, they're fighting for, because the DNA is so, I'm going to call it what it is, slight. They're fighting for familial DNA tests. So there are 200 unsolved homicides in Suffolk County since 1960. And the assistant district attorney of Suffolk County says, there are 200 families like the Vetranos who don't have closure. However, so the NYPD chief deputy Emmanuel Katronikis, he runs the NYPD forensic lab. And he says, this is a powerful scientific tool that can help identify suspects who commit violent crimes while also providing safeguards against wrongful convictions by identifying the actual perpetrator. So he's saying, look, this can identify a perpetrator and this can also exonerate the innocent. So a professor at New York University School of Law, Aaron Murphy, says familial DNA can be useful. It can put relatives of convicts on the wrong side of the page as possible suspects just because they're a blood relation. And she calls familial DNA poor quality, unreliable information. That's
the first time anybody heard say that.
Well, Aaron Murphy says this because she says it, racial bias kind of lurks around the familial DNA, search because it focuses disproportionately on people of color. And this is her opinion. She said, people of color are convicted in numbers proportionally greater than their population size, meaning more people of color and people of a race other than Caucasian are arrested more as offenders, considering their population size. So on the flip side, a Denver district attorney, Mitch Morrissey, says that people of color are also higher represented in populations of crime victims. So he said, homicide victims in his area are 90% Black and Hispanic. And, 71% are rape victims. So he's saying, okay, so there's a higher percentage of people of color arrested. This DNA process can help find the correct perpetrators because they're also higher represented in cases of victims.
Victimology.
Yeah. So, there's a former LA prosecutor named Rock Harmon who says, you know what, familial search process, it's race blind is what he calls it. So I know that it's come in handy for things like the Grim Sleeper. He was identified because his son had been arrested. He'd never been arrested. His son had been arrested on a drug charge. And when when his son's DNA is entered into CODIS, they have DNA entered into CODIS for these, 50 rapes and murders. But he has not been arrested, so they can't match it to anything. So they used familial DNA to catch one of the most prolific serial killers, definitely in Southern California, and probably in the United States, because he left his crust of, John's famous pizza in the garbage can, and the, homicide detective was a busboy.
Right.
And, that's...
I don't think any of this should stop anybody from using familial DNA. I mean, it's
I don't think so either.
It's a great tool.
But I understand what Aaron Murphy's talking about. There's also the case of the young girl in Iowa, and they have DNA. She was raped and murdered on the first night of her living in her own apartment at the age of 18. And it's tracked to a young man, a familial connection to a young man in Missouri who's a documentary filmmaker. And he's now working with her mother on a film about this subject. And she and he have formed a bond, but she still believes a member of his family murdered her daughter. She believes it was a distant uncle or a relative of some sort.
That is a fascinating story.
It's really fascinating. So when you talk about DNA, and I just want it to be black and white, I really do. That's me. I'm very black and white. I'm Channel Lewis. I have a list of right and wrong. And it's so awful that the world presents to me on a daily basis gray. And so many shades of gray. There are so many shades of gray. If there's any color in this case, it's gray. It's not black. It's not white. It's real gray. So his first trial, the jurors are deadlocked. And it's a hung jury, so they go to trial again. And within hours, he is convicted. And
this is in the second trial.
Mm-hmm. And here's where it gets... And this is all so new. I mean, it's November 20th of 2018. After 13 hours of deliberations, the jury tells the judge, we're deadlocked. So the judge finally says, okay, I'll declare it a mistrial. So the prosecutors are like, we're going to try this again. So St. Patrick's Day of this year, March 17th, they go back to opening statements. Both the defense and the prosecutors do their opening statements, and by March 28th, they both rest to their cases.
So it only took 11 days to try the case.
Second time.
The second time.
That night, the night of March 28th, after both the defense and prosecution rest, there's an anonymous letter sent to the defense team by someone calling themselves an ex-NYPD officer, alerting them that prosecutors withheld potentially exculpatory material.
Wow.
April 1st, Supreme Court Justice Michael Aloise denies all the defense's motion to conduct a hearing about allegations in the anonymous letter.
And the anonymous letter came after the conviction?
The night. No, not after the conviction.
Right.
After they've rested.
After they've rested, so before the conviction.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. The defense gets this anonymous letter the night of both sides resting, March 28th. By April 1st, the judge is like, I'm I'm denying the defense's request for a mistrial, and we're going to close, we want the closing arguments to commence. At 4 p.m., they begin deliberating. At 9 p.m., they reach the verdict of guilty on all 4 charges of murder, sexual abuse, assault. I don't even remember what the 4th one was. So Channel Lewis's attorney files a motion requesting an evidentiary hearing relating to, here we have another red herring, jury misconduct.
Now, that is after the conviction, right? Mm-hmm. So they take, just so we're clear, they start deliberating at 4 p.m. They have a verdict by 9 p.m.?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
On April 1st.
Yeah, okay.
He has not been sentenced yet. So on April 17th of 2019, his attorneys, the legal aid, file a motion requesting the evidentiary hearing. I'm sorry. So the judge...
Exhausting, isn't it?
It's exhausting. The judge says, all right, I'm going to postpone sentencing until April 22nd. So I don't know if it's difficult to find appropriate jurors in that part in Queens, New York. But one of the reasons the first trial was considered in November of 2018 was considered a mistrial was that there was a juror who told everyone in the jury room that he had made up his mind on the second day of the trial after Karina's parents had testified. They're 2 days in, and he's like, Karina's parents testified, and now my mind's made up.
Yeah.
Right. So we have Juror A, Juror B, Juror C, and Juror D in the second trial. So one of the jurors said that he had doubts about Lewis's guilt, but he gave in because the evening of the 17th of April, he believed that the judge was going to keep them well into the night until they delivered a guilty verdict. 9 p.m., they had to come to an answer. They'd already been in the courthouse for 12 hours.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Juror A said, I was getting flustered. I was having migraines. They were serving us food from a pizza joint. It wasn't the healthiest, and I just needed to get out of there.
So you convict somebody.
You convict someone for murder, a death sentence, because you have a migraine. Look, I get them too. And I didn't want the unhealthy food from the pizza joint.
Great.
Mm-hmm. He also said he felt he was subtly pressured by the judge because he was wearing a purple shirt, and that was Karina Vetrano's favorite color. So he believed it was a deliberate show of solidarity with the victim's family. So he didn't want to vote guilty. He had, questions about Channel Lewis's guilt. But, he had a migraine. He didn't like the food.
And he thought the judge was sending a subtle message?
Been there 12 hours. He's tired. And the judge was wearing purple.
Okay. This guy's... Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the judge refuses to respond to that comment. I don't blame you. Purple's my favorite color too, Judge Eloise. So Juror A also says that he had tried... I apologize. This is Juror B. Juror B said that he had tried to send a note to the judge to see how long they were going to have to stay there. But he tried to get it to the judge, but the jury foreman tore it up. Juror B said, I tried to ask the judge to send the judge a note asking how long we were going to be here, but the foreman ripped up my note.
Okay. We got a bunch of kindergartners on this jury.
Oh, my God. There's more. Just wait. So the foreman says, I don't remember getting a note from Juror A, and Juror B, I have no recollection of tearing up a note. That's what the foreman says. So Juror A, back to Juror A, says that he told his fellow jurors that he did not believe prosecutors had proven that Karina Vetrano had been sexually abused. The fact that her jogging shorts had been pulled off, he said, there was an absence of DNA. I don't know how you can say that there was, a sexual assault. I don't know how you can add that to the list of charges because her shorts were put off and there's no DNA. So Juror D says to Juror A, I've been raped and it can happen. They say Juror D convinced the rest of the jurors that he was guilty. I don't know how that's possible.
Well, the deliberative process in a jury room includes, the ability of other jurors to convince their fellow jurors that, the defendant is guilty or not guilty. You can do that.
Well, let me just give you the rest of the information. The jurors were told they could only convict on a first-degree murder charge if they also found Channel Lewis guilty of sexual abuse.
Okay.
And wait. Juror D denies that she ever said she had been raped.
Okay. Okay.
Juror C, again, drew a comparison between the evidence in Channel Lewis's trial and another case on which he had been a juror.
Well, you can't do that, I don't think you can.
Yeah.
No.
Another juror asked him to please stop saying that. I mean, I don't... So, okay. So, Juror A, Juror B, Juror C, Juror D are, being investigated. It's...
You're like a group of little teeny kindergarten babies.
That's why I'm saying I don't know if it's difficult to find appropriate jurors, but apparently there was also, this is terrible, technical difficulties that made it difficult for the jurors to listen to the recorded confession, the videotaped interview.
And okay.
So they couldn't really see that videotape, which anyone can if you're on YouTube.
Right. So that's a big deal.
I think that's a huge deal.
Oh, it is, because it's obviously available. You can see it. You can listen to it. It's clear as bell. So
there was a holdout juror who wanted, obviously to not vote guilty. He has an attorney. And the attorney says he was bullied in the jury room. It's an insane coercive atmosphere for any juror to be in. And if things were different, the outcome might be different. Well, thanks, counselor. We get that. I mean, it's insane.
I don't know what bullying means. I mean, and has anybody ever seen 12 Angry Men? I mean,
or even the Amy, oh God, what is her name?
Amy Schumer?
Amy Schumer's version
of 12 Angry Men. Yeah. But that's funny. But
right. But it's the same thing. I mean, convincing someone of something, whether you have, that's what the whole deliberative process is supposed to be in the jury room. Right.
It's not bullying. It's like, hey, look, we're looking at the same evidence. How can you see this differently than this? Here is why I think he's guilty or not guilty. I mean, it's not bullying. I don't know. I don't get that at all.
I know I've said it on this podcast numerous times, but those one of the things I really am in awe of in Canada are professional jury pools, because my limited experience with jury duty and actually having to show up and be there and sit with, I'm just going to say what it is, the great unwashed of every race, color, religion, flavor, clothing, attire.
And by that, I would say the great unwashed of the mind. You're dealing with people who are not even close to being intellectually able to digest this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself in that group too. I'm not saying everyone else is the great unwashed and I'm over here with my freshly showered butthole. I'm saying I'm in the great unwashed.
You're
also.
Back to the butt again.
Sorry, it's I can never stop talking about the butt. Absolutely, I can. So, my limited experience in jury duty was Superior Court several years ago, and one man I thought did a stellar job. People brought knitting and books and, phones, obviously, etc. But he sat, for 8 hours in this room, 250 of us, holding up a book that the title was Guilty and the font was in dripping blood. And I thought to myself, sir, you are fucking smart. So he didn't get picked.
Yeah,
I didn't get picked.
You think?
Yeah. But here's the part that struck me as so awful. There's even a larger group of us. Before we were split into two groups of like 250. There's probably 400 people, 500 people in this room. So I'm bad at math. So they make the announcements in English and in Spanish. And if you need an interpreter, please come up to the table, whatever. And a large group of people flooded to the table. And I thought, how are you a jury of my peers? If I'm on trial, how are you a jury? You don't speak English? And something that has struck me just recently in the last few days is the way words are interpreted, not even in differing languages, but if you speak the same language, but a different culture.
Right. Different colloquialisms.
A different part of the country or the world. You speak the same language, but a word means something different. So how are you ever going to get a jury of your peers? Like I said, one of the things I find so fascinating about Canada is professional jury pools. People who know the fucking law. Know the law, know what you are up against. No, I mean, there's also, no death penalty in Canada. But, and I have to say, I'm not saying that Canada is soft on crime, especially murder, but too many people have been released, in my opinion, too early. If you commit a murder in Canada, you should go to prison for life. If you don't have a death penalty, I totally understand that and support it. Then you don't get out. You don't get out in 20 years. You just don't. You spend that much time for a robbery.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But that's not having anything to do with jury pools. That's the laws in Canada. The argument against having professional jury pools is which I lean toward. I think it might be a good idea. But the argument, just so you understand, the argument against them is that there's no difference between a jury pool who knows the law and a judge. There's no difference between a bench trial and a jury trial, because you're dealing with people who strictly know the law. And the idea of having a jury of your peers is that you can introduce things that are not strictly, is that you can deal with emotion and things like that. And that's why they want you to be tried by a jury of your peers. That's the idea. But I'm not sure it's a good idea.
Who are my peers?
Right.
It's rhetorical. Don't answer.
Right. No, it's a good question.
No, it's rhetorical. Don't answer. So a jury of my peers, while I have migraines, I don't want a juror who says, I have a migraine and I don't want your fucking pizza food. I'm going to say guilty so I can go home. A jury of my peers is not someone who says, I was raped and this is could absolutely, no DNA could be found. And then later on saying, I never made a statement saying I was raped. A jury of my peers does not include a man who tries to get a note to the judge and then says it was torn up, and then the jury foreman says that never happened.
Right.
None of those people are a jury of my peers or your peers or any of our peers. These are people who maybe are tired of the case, even though I don't know of any case that has been pushed through this quickly. But these are people who, are not there to get the right answer.
Precisely. No, that's why that goes to your argument for professional jury pools.
Yeah. Sorry. I
tend to agree with you. I think that I was just presenting what the other side would say, what the defense bar would say.
I understand, and that's something I love about you, is that your ability to see both sides of it. I'm very black and white, and one of the things I adore about your big, beautiful, throbbing brain is that you can see both sides, and you can come to the point in the middle where both sides have validity and both sides have negative aspects. So here's what the Queen's District Attorney's office said. The NYPD has painstakingly investigated the murder of Karina Vetrano. The evidence shows clearly that Channel Lewis is responsible for her death. Multiple legal hearings and 2 criminal trials over 2 years have already exhaustively examined the issues. And this, he's referring to this 11th hour, letter to the defense. An 11th hour missive riddled with falsehoods and inaccuracies is not going to change anyone's mind.
That makes sense to me.
It does. It does feel like a last minute grandstanding. It may have been a real, letter to the defense. It may have been, I don't know. I honestly don't think this case is over. I don't think we're done. There's a conviction. There's a man in prison. And there are more questions at the end than we had at the beginning when Ms. Vetrano went jogging without her dad for the first time. In my mind.
Oh, I agree. I think it's the defense is not going to just let this sit. They're going to, because there's all this confusion around it. But that letter to the defense came so late in the game, you'd think that it would have come earlier.
Right.
It's just the whole thing's suspect. But you're right. It ain't dead.
Well, of course, the Legal Aid Society has said we are immediately appealing this, which I understand. And, I adore you, Tipster Tony, but if you ever tell me about a case like this again, I'll go to New York and I'll pinch you really hard. And more cowbell.
And remember, if you would like to become a patron of Just the Tipsters, go to patreon.com/Just the Tipsters. And if you would like to call us with a tip, call 832-TIPSTER or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com.